So if you hear somebody say that they're willfully ignorant, it's not really a thing. They're really not being willfully ignorant. They're just ignoring whatever it is that they're choosing to ignore. You're listening to
Path of the Jedi
with your host, Ronnie Cruz. All right, welcome to Path of the Jedi, the podcast where Star Wars meets personal development. Bright Sun citizens, my name is Ronnie Cruz. I will be your host on this journey. And since we've gotten such great response from the last few episodes, let's just dive right into it. For the next two episodes of Path of the Jedi, that's today's and the one coming next week, we will be discussing the Jedi Code. Now, for those of you who don't know what the Jedi Code is, for my non-Star Wars fans, according to Wikipedia, that's right, I said it correctly, Wikipedia, it's a real thing. Wikipedia says, the Jedi Code was a set of rules that governed the behavior of the Jedi Order. Now, there are a lot of different tenets and principles within the Jedi Code, and trying to track them all down has been pretty difficult, if a written version of all of them even exists in the first place. There is a short mantra, however, that's generally regarded as the fundamental pillars of the Jedi Code, and that's what we're going to use here today as the basis of our discussion. The mantra is as follows: there is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force. Today we're going to cover the first two pillars, so let's start with there is no emotion, there is peace. To me, I don't really see this pillar, or any other pillar in the code for that matter, as a strict rule, right? As a rule to govern behavior. I interpret them more as guiding principles that can help you develop a deeper understanding and therefore control of yourself. If we were to look at these as strict rules, I think it could be easily mistaken as saying you shouldn't have emotions, which we all know is impossible, or we can interpret it as saying that we should suppress our emotions. And again, I think we can all agree that that's not really realistic either. If you look at the Jedi Order, this is pretty much how they handled Anakin, and we all know how that turned out, right? So there's got to be a deeper conversation, a deeper layer of guidance, because there is actually a tremendous amount of wisdom that can be gleaned from this particular code. So there is no emotion, there is peace. What does it mean? At face value, completely unrealistic to not have emotion. We're not robots. So what if we make an adjustment? What if we add the word if to the front of this so that it reads, if there is no emotion, there is peace? Now that's starting to sound a little bit more reasonable, but then the question is, well, how do we get to a place where there is no emotion? Well, I think the answer is that we are not our emotions. Our emotions are not us. They are not in the driver's seat. Yes, we experience emotions, but we are separate from it. We are the awareness behind the emotion. And you guys know this stuff already intuitively, right? And I'm sure you've heard of it from other people as well. Other people have said this, maybe not in so many words. If you look at Mel Robbins, for example, her 5-second rule that catapulted her to success, it's so successful because it makes perfect intuitive sense. All it is it's an interrupt, right? It's interrupting an emotional state, right? So that you can detach from the emotion and then go off and do the thing that you want to do, right? The more we practice this, the more present we can be, the more mindful and in the moment we can be, and we strengthen our ability to, again, detach ourselves from the emotion, right? Now, I was listening to a podcast the other day called the Growth Mindset Podcast, and was on episode 189 with special guest Jennifer Clamp. And Jennifer had a really great take on emotion that I'm just going to read to you what she had to say. Emotion is data. Your emotional response, your immediate feeling in response to a situation, gives you information, but it isn't everything. You can choose how you respond to that emotion. There's other information you can bring into your decision on how to respond. And being able to create that separation is something that we get better at as we mature. I think that sums it up very nicely. The more we can separate ourselves from our emotions, the more mature we can be in our decision making. And so the peace comes in knowing that we are not our emotions, we're the awareness behind the emotion and our ability to detach ourselves from those emotions when need be. There is no emotion, there is peace. Okay, on to the next pillar. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. This one took me a little while. I had to juggle this around my noggin for a little bit before I could really figure out what it was trying to say, or at least what I think it was trying to say. Here's what I came up with. The first thing I wrote down in my notes on this one is, of those ignorant of the things you have knowledge of, do not judge. Having knowledge and information doesn't automatically equate to accomplishment and achievement, even though that's how we're taught in modern society, right? It doesn't make having these things doesn't make you any better than the next person. In fact, if you have knowledge that somebody else doesn't have, it's kind of your responsibility to share that, right? To share your perspective, your knowledge, and your wisdom. It's the old example that if you know where water is in the desert, it's your responsibility to share that information with people. So don't hold knowledge as some sort of badge of honor. If you have knowledge, share it so that there is no longer ignorance. Now, one caveat to this that I do have to share is that you got to be careful not to be the know-it-all with this, right? Don't be that guy that has all the information on everything and that knows everything about everything, right? Like, you don't want to be giving out advice to people when they didn't ask for it in the first place. I mean, it's all right, it's all well and good here and there, but if that becomes your main conversation all the time, it gets tiring to listen to because, well, I don't want advice all the time, right? Who wants that? And in the internet age, we all have the same access, for the most part, generally speaking, the same access to the same information. So you don't have to be an expert at everything. It's really more that if somebody is seeking your perspective and you have a potential insight that you can share with them, then share with them, right? Because again, if there is knowledge, there is no ignorance. The second interpretation that I wrote down in my notes for this particular pillar is that once you have knowledge, there's no going back, right? You can't unsee what you have seen. A great example of this, and a silly example, is internet memes, right? Once you see them, you can't unsee them. There's this one particular Star Wars meme that's been out for years, but it's of the scene where Luke is hanging out with Obi-Wan, and Luke is staring down the hilt of Obi-Wan's lightsaber. If his thumb had accidentally flipped the switch on that lightsaber, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. I'll share that on our Twitter account so you guys can reference it. But again, it's one of those things that once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? Once you have the knowledge, there is no ignorance of that knowledge. And that's why I don't really think that there's such a thing as willful ignorance, right? Because when something is willful, it's an indication that there's knowledge. And if there's knowledge, how can there be ignorance? So if you hear somebody say that they're willfully ignorant, it's not really a thing. They're really not being willfully ignorant. They're just ignoring whatever it is that they're choosing to ignore. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. So again, if you have knowledge, if you have insights that could potentially help somebody, don't hoard it. Share it freely, especially with people that are looking for help, right? If you have knowledge, it's not like you can unlearn it anyways, right? So you might as well act upon it. Like learning that we are separate from our emotions, learning that our emotions don't have to control us. You now know that after hearing this episode. So you either act upon it, use that information wisely, and allow it to help yourself grow and help other people grow, or you choose to ignore it. Either way, the responsibility is in your hands. And I'm going to leave it at that. Yeah. I mean, I had more to talk about, but I think we can save it for next week's episode. We are going to continue to talk about the Jedi Code next week, but for today's purposes, I think there's plenty enough to chew on. So yeah, we'll leave it there. What do you guys think? What are your thoughts? What's on your mind right now? How are you feeling? Right? Let us know. Hit us up on our Facebook or Twitter. It's at POTJ Podcast. Yeah, you can connect with us there. Of course, the website is up and it's ready. I'm slowly but surely populating it. I'm caught up to episode 7 in terms of the transcript. And there's also the recommended reading list that I'm building there. And of course, as time goes on, the website as a resource for you guys will continue to compile over time with all the stuff that you need related to Path of the Jedi and the things that we talk about, right? Also, remember, if you need to listen to the show on a web browser, we have all the episodes there on the website, and the latest episode will be at the bottom of each page. So yeah, don't forget, visit our site, visit our blog. It's pathofthejedi.com. Really easy to remember. Speaking of social media, there's a new platform where you can find Path of the Jedi now. We just got linked up with this. It's called Reason.fm. It's a social podcasting platform where both listeners and creators, podcasters, can interact, right? So you can go on there as a listener, create an account, create a profile, and subscribe to podcasts. There's a bunch of podcasts on there, and you can interact with the creators. You can interact with other podcasters. So it's a really cool thing. I just got started on it, so I'm still kind of feeling my way around. But again, that's another place where you guys can find Path of the Jedi. And in fact, that is where I found the Growth Mindset podcast that I talked about earlier. So I will give you guys a link to that particular episode of the Growth Mindset podcast with special guest Jennifer Clamp, so you guys can listen to it and check it out. It's a great interview. It's a great podcast in general. So again, it's Reason.fm. That's the new platform. Go there and create yourself an account, and let's start interacting. And of course, it wouldn't be a Path of the Jedi episode without the shout out. So this week's shout out, actually, I want to give a shout out to my dear friend, Casey Shiano DeCola. That's right, Casey Shiano DeCola. She is amazing. Actually, her and her husband Luciano and their 3 beautiful children, they are absolutely exceptional. For one, I do not understand how Casey is able to manage everything that she's juggling right now, right? And I guess this is really a testament to all of you women out there of the world, especially the moms of the world. You all are superheroes in my book. There's no way that I could do half of what you guys do and accomplish, because on top of that, Casey is also building a thriving network marketing business. And in fact, I'm going to be up there again in December 4th, back in the Hershey, Pennsylvania area, the Harrisburg, Hershey area. So if you guys want to link up there, I'm going to be hanging out with Casey and her family and her teams. If you want to learn more about Casey and connect with her, she's actually also an incredible coach and teacher. She gives horse riding lessons, right? So she's absolutely phenomenal at that. I'll leave her Instagram in the show notes so you guys can link up with her. Again, thank you so much, Casey, for all that you do. This shout out goes to you. Don't forget, guys, if there's anybody that you'd like to give a shout out to, we'd love to do that for you here on the show. Just send us an email to info@pathofthejedi.com. Put shout out in the subject heading, and in the body of the message, you can either leave an MP3 so that we can play it here on the show, or just write out the message of what you want to send to that individual. Again, the email is info@pathofthejedi.com. The last piece of news that I want to share with you guys is that as of this morning, we are officially at 100 downloads total. Well, actually, probably more now at this point, but we have reached the 1,000 download mark officially, and we've done it with, well, as of this recording, only 13 episodes. So this episode number 14 isn't even out yet, and we've already reached 1,000 downloads. So I'm so happy and excited and elated for this milestone, and I want to share it with you guys, because all of you that are listening are really the ones that are responsible for helping us reach that, right? So thank you so much for continuing to listen and support this podcast. Again, find us on whatever platform that suits you. If you happen to be on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review. That always helps us out. But the main thing is thank you for continuing to support and listen to Path of the Jedi. Again, my commitment to you is to continue to bring you good content week in, week out that'll help you on your hero's journey. So that's going to do it for today, guys. We will catch you next week with a whole new episode. Until then, be well, be safe, and may the Force be with you. This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company nor Lucasfilm Limited, and is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names and sounds and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is intellectual property of Path of the Jedi unless otherwise indicated.